Hey guys, you're not going to want to miss this episode. We'll be sharing a bunch of tips and stories about our bow fishing adventures.
This summer, whether you're at the range or in the field, WSI Sports' Hypertech bamboo tanks, tees, and leggings will have you covered. Visit WSISports.com and use Lea's affiliate code, LLCO10, for 10% off your purchase. All products are proudly made in the USA. WSI is bringing back pride in American-made clothing. Again, that code is LLCO10 for 10% off your order at WSISports.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Mac Outdoors podcast, where a dynamic mother-daughter duo share their adventures, tips, and advice. I am Mia, and I'll be accompanied by the one and only daughter, Lea. It is time to get to outdoors, hunt, shoot, and spend time with family and friends. Let's get this show on the road.
Hey guys, welcome back to another week with Mia and Lea on Mac Outdoors.
Hi guys. So Lea, you told everybody that we're going to talk about bow fishing, which we did discuss briefly in episode 14, but today you want to share a little more detail for some of your new friends and people who haven't fished before. Is that my correct assumption?
Yeah.
You know, it happens when we assume, so I want you to tell me.
Yeah, so I wanted to share a little more information about bow fishing and all the small details that a lot of people ask about. So, after my graduation, I decided for the weekend that we should go bow fishing because I heard from a bunch of people that they're still spawning and I hadn't gotten to go yet this year. I took one of my friends bow fishing and he neglected to tell me that he has never shot a bow or even gone bow fishing. So we just threw him right into the fire with bow fishing because we thought, oh, he's shot a bow before, which comes to my first point is that if you are bringing someone new with you, it's really good to show them the bow and let them take a few practice shots at least before setting them up there to sling arrows at fish.
Right, in which we generally do that, but as you said, we kind of thought that he had shot a bow before. I mean, we knew he hadn't been bow fishing, but we're pretty lucky because we have a pond in front of our house, so we can shoot the arrows there and not have to worry about damaging them and making chipped fiberglass or anything crazy like that on the arrows. So now we've been reminded, I guess your first time out you sometimes forget, but always check with whoever is going and see what their experience is. And also, as Lea said, show them your equipment.
Yeah, and especially with us, we have a bunch of different bows, left and right-handed, so it's really good to know which bow to give them that refers to draw weight, because sometimes we have my little cousin come and shoot, and he's only pulling 20 pounds, whereas my friend is probably pulling 60 pounds on our bow. And it's always good to know if they can shoot fingers or release, because 2 of our bows are made for shooting fingers, whereas the rest of them are made for a release.
Right, and that leads me to also mention that in the bows, what we have are compound bows, so they have cams on them and they don't have a let off. So their draw length really is irrelevant on the bow fishing bows that we have, but my own bow that I use for bow fishing is one of my retired hunting bows. So it's actually to my draw length and it has let off and so forth, which is partly why it has a loop on it. And also, as we mentioned in our previous episode, the first time I went bow fishing, I shot over 100 times. I had blisters on my fingers from shooting so much. So I'm kind of a wimp and I use my release. And that also helps me maintain my shooting form for hunting with my compound bow. So I'm kind of a wimp that way.
It's pretty lucky. I know I shoot my old retired bow as well, and it does get you in shape. We were just talking about it last night that we shoot a lot of bow fishing, which, as we mentioned in our last bow fishing episode, that it's really helpful during hunting season. It's getting you prepared.
Right. And one thing I've found with bow fishing, and it helps not just in hunting, but in some of the 3D competitions, is that you become more of an instinctive shooter and you can react more quickly if an animal has moved from one place to another from wherever you've set your range marks if you're hunting. And so you really become better at determining distance and movement of animals.
I think it really does. I know when I shot Wyheck a couple of years ago at Nationals, every year they have a moving target that'll slide towards you or slide left to right, right to left, something like that on a pulley. And I noticed from the first year I did it, before I started bow fishing to after I started, I was picking up the target a lot faster and I was making a lot better shots. So it's really helpful in those competitions as well.
Yeah, and what I noticed watching you, Lea, was that you were able to, on those moving targets, they always let you draw first, but you were able to maintain your draw and swing without losing your form because you had practiced in the boat swinging at carp. So it was really cool to see the difference in the years from, like you said, before you were bow fishing and after. You really, she was able to get some 10Xs on a couple moving targets because she had practiced bow fishing.
And what's also kind of helpful, the aim small, miss small. Our carp here are a lot smaller than out east of us, so we're shooting at smaller targets, which I am just going to say helps my shooting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Definitely. And so when you took your friend, what were some things as far as when he was fishing with you, what are some things that happened? Like, did he learn? I know he asked a lot of questions before he went, so he had some answers and some ideas, but what kind of experience did he have out there on the water?
Well, we made it a 2-day event, but the first day I noticed he really watched me shoot. He wanted me to shoot first, and he really was observant of what I was doing. Mm-hmm. So he was trying to pick up what I was doing, so when he would shoot, he would not look like he didn't know what he was doing.
Right.
But one big thing I noticed is that he was taking a really long time to shoot. Like when we would spot a fish, and of course the bow is going to scare the fish, so you only have a certain time frame to let that arrow fly. And I would notice he would draw and like really take a long time. And as I started to notice and watch, he was really starting to aim the bow, like making it very precise, which he did get a few shots off doing that. But of course I did help him, saying, you don't have as much time. And he did start to notice that the fish were swimming before he could get a shot off.
Yeah. And so then the fish is already gone from wherever he had aimed, and your depth is changed, and the perception from the light refraction in the water and everything is different. And so that's something to you, our listeners, if you are going to start bow fishing and you haven't been out there yet, is it just takes experience. It takes practice. And Lea has learned to acquire her target quickly and to determine how the depth of the water, how far the fish is down there, and be able to release an arrow. Because honestly, the past 3 times that I've been out with Lea, she has hit her fish on the first try every time. So she's really getting good at that, and it just takes practice. And Lea, what are some things that people can do to practice? Just get out there and do it?
Oh, well, there's a lot of great ways you can practice. Of course, you're not always going to be able to recreate the exact scenario or a fish in the water, but really good one is, like we mentioned, to shoot a jug in the water before you go. And that one's really key for new shooters, even if you haven't shot in a long time bow fishing. It at least gets you to notice where your arrow's flying when you shoot. So then okay, my arrow's going here on top of the water, which then you can decide how it's going to look when you hit down in the water. I think a huge one too is just, as we said, you're just going to have to go out there and you're just going to have to shoot at a lot of fish.
Right. And one thing with Lea, when she first started bow fishing, actually, you used to get frustrated, which that's one of Lea's traits that she's overcome over the years, is her frustration. Not being upset if you miss, don't be upset if you miss a fish. It was just a fish. And it's really just great fun to be out there. And if you missed it, it's okay. Hopefully there will be more fish. Unfortunately, when we went after Leah's graduation, there weren't very many fish out, although we had been told that the fish were spawning and they were everywhere. We really didn't see very many, so it was really cool when Lea saw the fish that she actually did hit it. But if she wouldn't have hit it, whatever, it wouldn't have been a big deal. It wasn't the end of the day, right?
Right. Well, and a big one with your frustration is it's not like having an elk tag or a deer tag where you get that shot and then you just have one fish to fill it. You have your fishing license and can go out there weekend after weekend and shoot and shoot and shoot. So that's a big part too, is like you can shoot as many times as you want, as many fish as you want.
Right. That's a really good point. And in Colorado, the pike and carp are nuisance species, so you can shoot as many as you want.
Right.
So like she said, there's not a bag limit, or there's not the pressure of your one shot on an elk, which I wouldn't suggest just flinging arrows at an elk.
Right. Yeah, you might want to aim on that one a little more, but...
And you definitely might want to do some practice and training, which is partly why we like bow fishing, because it is practice and it does train our muscles for archery season. So definitely, if you're an archery hunter and you're out there pursuing big game, it's fun to go and bow fish.
And it's really easy to get a setup. I know we talked about it in episode 14. There's a bunch of tips on how to create your own rig or where to get a rig. So you can head over to that episode after this one.
Yes. And another thing, Lea, I know it's our first time out this year for you and I have my own bow, as I mentioned, and then we have some that we share with everybody, but we definitely, before we head out every year, we have to look at our bows, and this is the same with archery hunting. You always have to examine your bow, look at the cams, look at the limbs, make sure there's no cracks, nothing's bent or anything like that. What other maintenance did we do before we head out there?
I am huge on maintenance. I actually wrote a really good article for a regular bow, but it also applies to your bow fishing bow. As she said, check your limbs and cams and things like that, but also probably after a year of bow fishing, you're more than likely going to want to get your string replaced because it's going to have extreme sun damage, and from the water it really dries it out, and that would not be good if your string broke and had an explosion with your bow, something crazy. So it's always good, and I actually bring my bow in probably once a month, which I probably should more than that, but I always wax the string when I can, when I remember, because it gets left in the bow and then out in the sun, stuff like that. So always pay attention to your string, and if you will know when you need it replaced when it starts looking really frayed and not tight and wax like it does the first day you bought the bow.
And so that's another point that I'd like to bring up, is that a lot of times when we're bow fishing, we're in shallow water, there's a lot of rocks, there's trees, sticks, and other things around, and your arrow can hit things and get damaged. So you always want to check it, make sure it's not cracked or chipped, because if you're shooting a fiberglass arrow that has any chips on it, that can really cause some big injuries, and we don't want that happening while you're out there, or anywhere for that matter.
Yeah, and another big thing with your arrow as well is the string and your jug, depending on what you're doing. I know a lot of the time, if you get a fish tangled up in your arrow or something, your arrow can cut your string. So it's always good when you're reeling in to check. I know with the reel I have, it'll jam if the string is frayed like that. So when it does jam, I always look if it was just a tangle or if it was frayed, and if it is, then you'll have to replace it, or else you're going to lose the fish and your arrow, which that's never fun.
Yeah, that's no fun. Arrows are pretty pricey. And talking about that, if you have frayed line, you can always trim it off and reattach the string to the arrow. You do want to be careful in that and recognize how much string you have left in your jug. As Lea said, like check your jugs, because we actually had one time. It was, I don't even remember who was shooting, but the string had been trimmed and somebody was shooting at a fish that was pretty far out, and they must have had a good draw length. I don't remember, but I remember the whole jug flying because there was not that much string and it had pulled the jug off of the, the holder.
Yeah, it's always good to at least pay attention to how much string you're taking off.
So always just keep an eye on that stuff, and so that you're not losing equipment or damaging equipment out there, or to prevent injuries. Nobody wants to get hurt when they're out having fun. So some items that you might want to have with you when you're bow fishing, if you're on a paddleboard, you want to wear a life preserver, or personal flotation device. On the boat, you may need that too, depending what kind of boat you have and what type of a swimmer you are and so forth. So always remember safety as far as that goes. And what other items can you think of, Lea?
One big important one that many bow fishermen will always tell you to have is polarized sunglasses. It makes it so much easier to actually see the fish, and it helps your eyes because you're looking at the water and the sun is reflecting, so it will hurt your eyes if you don't have sunglasses. So it is huge to have those polarized shades.
Right, and that's one thing, since we're talking about taking new people, it's interesting and fun to see people's faces when they're new to fishing or bow fishing, and you give them polarized glasses and suddenly they see the fish, and it's kind of funny to see them get all excited.
Yes, they're like, how do you spot the fish so fast? And it's like, well, here, try these. And then
magic!
Like, wow,
these magic lenses.
Yes.
So you definitely need polarized glasses. It's something that we forgot because it was our first time out, and we need to make a list or something, or listen to this episode next year before our first trip out. But we forgot our bug spray, and there definitely were mosquitoes out already, and sunscreen. And we had sunscreen, so that department was covered. And then if you're bow fishing, just like if you're shooting archery anywhere, you need a hat to protect yourself, but you have to be careful on how large of a hat because the string is going to hit the brim. So you definitely need to take care in what size hat you wear when you're bow fishing.
Yeah, I know I wore one of my bigger ball caps out this weekend, and my nose did get a little red because I had my hat on backwards. And I didn't put on sunscreen, but I survived.
Another thing with bow fishing, if you're in a boat or if you're wading, is I mentioned safety, and you always want to take care in where you're swinging. As I said, when you're following a carp with your arrow and you're at full draw, you need to really take care and know if you're with someone else where they are, because you don't want to swing your bow ever with an arrow in it. Never swing it towards someone else, especially if you're at full draw and you're swinging at a carp. Watch out so that you're not shooting toward your friends and family because you do like them, we hope. So always be careful with that. And then when you're pulling the arrows out of the fish, be careful there too, because if somebody's behind you, you don't want to accidentally jab them with your arrow once it comes free of the fish. You really need to be careful there also. And then carp have the plates in their gills. And so as you're holding the carp, you need to be careful where you're holding so that you don't cut your fingers with their gills. And unfortunately, we haven't gotten a fish for gar yet. And so I guess we'll learn some safety issues with that someday when we get to go fish for them.
Or pike, for that matter.
Yeah, we haven't arrowed a pike yet. And fun story, how about that pike that one time, Lea?
Yes. We were both on one end of the boat, cruising kind of the shoreline a little bit, and we had seen a few carp and cruising along, and all of a sudden we see this big, giant, black thing just swimming along beside us, and both of us were like, oh my gosh, jaws dropped, and it was like we knew it was a pike, and we were like, wow, we're actually seeing one. And then by the time it went by, we were like, why didn't we shoot that thing? Like,
we both looked at each other with our eyes just popped out of our head, and we both were like, why didn't either one of us draw our bows? Like, oh gosh.
It was still pretty cool though. That's like the first pike we've ever seen that we had a chance to shoot, but it's like, oh my gosh. Kind of like when you just see that monster bull out there and it's like, wow. And then you're like, oh, I should probably shoot that thing.
Oh, that makes me think of a fun story. I actually guest host at Whitetail Rendezvous podcast, and I interviewed our co-board member for SCI, Jim Willems, and I interviewed him for a future episode. And he told a really cool story about his wife and bow hunting, not fishing, but he talked about her actually archery hunting and stalking up on an antelope, and she got within range to shoot it, and she just sat there and watched it because she was in awe, and she never shot it, but she just had that experience. And if you've been out hunting ever, that's kind of the experience that we had with that pike. It was just like, whoa.
Yeah.
A great memory.
Yes. I'm pretty sure we've even had that moment with carp as well. I know one time we were shooting fish like crazy, and we ran around this turn, and there was a huge carp.
It was like a beluga whale.
It was the biggest carp I'd ever seen, and probably is like a normal size for people out east of us, you know, with those giant carp. But that thing was a monster. And we again were like, oh my God, look at that carp. And of course, Hank's in the back, shoot it. And we're just
it was gone before we
wow. Yes.
And those are fish stories. You can take them for whichever imagination you want to take them for.
Yes.
So let us know, guys, what kind of cool fish stories do you have about the 2-inch fish or the 20-inch fish or the 14-foot longs? I don't know. Those are fun bow fishing stories, and we hope you guys have some too. If you have questions about bow fishing, let us know. Follow us on our social media outlets, and you can message or comment there. And we'd love to hear your stories or any questions you have. Just feel free to reach out, and we'd like to be helpful if we can.
You can even share with us some of the crazy things you've done to get a fish, because I know I had a couple of those this weekend. Some things that I should have ended up in the water, but I somehow managed to get on my feet in the boat. So I'm sure there's people out there with some crazy stories of getting fish.
Yeah, I actually saw a episode of The Crush with Lee and Tiffany, and they were hunting gators, and Tiffany fell out of the boat when there were gators out there. And that episode was crazy because I can't imagine how scary that would be, but she got back in that boat really fast. So be careful, guys, if you're on the boat. Don't fall out.
Yeah, don't stand on the top of the seats that are pretty wobbly and move.
Yeah,
Because
don't do
that's
crazy
what I
stuff
was
like
doing
that.
this weekend, and somehow managed to shoot a fish, got it on the arrow, and was halfway out of the boat, but we made it. So
Yeah.
Let's hear your stories.
That's awesome, Leah. Don't copy Leah.
Leah does some crazy things.
Oh, kids. Actually, young adults. On that note, we're glad that you tuned in. Please subscribe. Please share our podcast with your friends, because the more people it reaches, obviously, the more it grows. And the more our sponsors will like it, and the more shows we can do for you. So thanks for listening. We hope that you'll come back and listen next week. Bye, guys.
Thanks for tuning in and listening to our crazy stories. See you next week.